We're watching Press TV's News Review, where we look deeper into some of the top stories of the day. On this edition, the Russian president has deplored the U.S.'s use of the dollar as a tool of economic and political war. At an annual economic forum in St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin warned that Russia may consider settling transactions for oil and gas in other national currencies and the euro. He said it would be a serious blow to the US dollar if Russia's oil companies stopped using the currency. Russia announced Thursday that it would completely remove the US greenback from its national wealth fund and turn the dollar-denominated assets into euros, yuan, and gold. Russia has long advocated a move away from the use of the dollar as the default global currency of trade and transactions. It says U.S. imposition of sanctions and its unpredictable economic policy have undermined the reliability of the American currency. Joining us on this edition of the News Review, we have historian, analyst, and author Mr. Marcus Papadopoulos joining us from the British capital, London. Also joining us from Moscow, we have journalist and political commentator Mr. Fred Weir. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Papadopoulos in London. Walk us through the recent comments made by the Russian president.
Well, America's stranglehold over most parts of the world is on account of a number of factors, which includes American military might and American culture, such as Hollywood and Netflix. But the foremost factor in accounting for American global supremacy is the dollar. Indeed, the Soviet Union ultimately lost the Cold War because the dollar triumphed over the ruble. Therefore, it is only logical and prudent for President Vladimir Putin to argue that the dollar needs to be replaced, because the Russian leadership is acutely aware that the American state uses the dollar in part to limit Russian progress, domestically and to limit Russian progress internationally. However, undermining the dollar is going to be an exceptionally difficult task for any leader in the world who seeks to enhance the national security of his country, because the American economy is supreme. Wherever America has a presence in the world, and as I said moments ago, America has a presence in most parts of the world, the American economy is integrated into the economies of, for instance, Latin America or Southeast Asia or parts of Africa or indeed the Middle East. And at the core of that integration is the dollar. So whilst Russia could limit itself when it comes to the use of the dollar, ultimately many countries in the world are heavily reliant, heavily dependent on the dollar. And it is my conviction that these countries will be most reluctant to relinquish their economic ties with the Americans. But also, I think there is a bigger picture at play, and one that I believe the Russian leadership needs to take into consideration when they carry out their strategic planning. And it is this. Whilst Russia is part of the global banking system, they are vulnerable to America and, of course, Britain, because the global banking system was established by Britain and then has been enhanced by America since the end of the Second World War. In short, the Americans and the British are in charge of the global banking system. So therein lies a weakness for the Russian Federation. They are part of a club, so to speak, in which the people in charge of the club are America and Britain, two countries which pose an immense threat, political, economic, and military threat to the national security of the Russian Federation. So I do submit that the Russian leadership do need to take into account that Russia's membership of the global banking system may, on the one hand, pay dividends, but on the other hand, does make Russia somewhat beholden to Washington and London.
Fred Weir, let's get your thoughts on the issue of Vladimir Putin. He's warned that Russia may consider settling transaction for oil and gas in other national currencies, including the euro. How big of a blow would that be to the U.S.'s dollar, the U.S.'s currency?
It depends on whether other countries would join in that. It's a complicated thing because it's often important in international trade to have a currency that's stable. And the Russian ruble isn't that. It's gone through wild fluctuations in the past decade. Even the British pound isn't exactly stable. The US dollar has been the mainstay of world trade, not only in oil, but a lot of things for a long time. But Russia could do that. It could get a basket of currencies that people would pay for their oil in. It's not just that Russia and China have been talking for a long time about de-dollarization. That's a thing. Russia has eliminated all of its deposits in the Federal Reserve, T-bills, and now they're moving more. And they're not just doing that to kind of undercut the US dollar, but because Putin has said several times that he thinks the dollar is going to crash for other reasons. For instance, massive social spending in the United States, like real huge quantities of that, unprecedented amounts of deficit spending. The US dollar's days are numbered. That's what the Russian leaders say. So they're saying, we're getting out of the dollar, putting our own assets into other currencies, other commodities like gold, and they recommend that everybody else should too.
Staying with you, Mr. Weir, you mentioned that it is complicated, but what we have to take into account is this could spark an idea. This could be the first block in a movement that eventually, we know it's most likely impossible to eliminate the U.S. dollar from international transactions, but what can happen is that the power and the hold it has on the international market, it can be significantly reduced, can it?
Well, yes, and it's perfectly clear that for Russia, the Americans have been weaponizing the dollar for some time. And you're in Iran, so you will know the various ways that U.S. sanctions depend upon dollar dependency and taking it away. They do that aggressively. So, yes, there are other countries that would have reasons to join the Russians and the Chinese in moving against the U.S. dollar, boosting their own assets in other currencies, but not that many. I don't think Europe is ready for that. I don't think Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, which, oil trade is a huge portion of global trade, and it's all denominated in dollars these days. But yes, the Russians are threatening to do that. And I think that this is part of our escalating dynamic we're seeing, where the Americans keep pouring on more sanctions on the Russians, and they keep thinking of ways to retaliate.
Mr. Papadopoulos, before we wrap up the program, give us your thoughts on that issue as well. This could be the start of a commencing of a way to reduce the influence of the U.S. dollar in the international market.
Yes, indeed. Vladimir Putin, for some years now, has been talking about the need for the world to free itself of the dollar, because, as I said moments ago, American global hegemony is to an exceptionally large extent based on the supremacy of the dollar. But I do not believe that we will see the dollar fall in the immediate or indeed the far future. History teaches us that anything is possible. The dollar could collapse. However, I do not see that happening. Europe will not relinquish the dollar, and I do not believe China would relinquish using the dollar. After all, the Chinese economic miracle, which began some 40 years ago under Deng Xiaoping, is overwhelmingly based on Beijing's trading and investment relationship with America. Despite what the Chinese say publicly, it is not in the interest of the Chinese economy for the American dollar to be weakened or indeed replaced, or for it to collapse. Because if that happened, then the Chinese would seriously feel the economic consequences of that.
All right, thank you for your comments. Journalist and political commentator Fred Weir joining us from Moscow. Also thanks to historian, analyst, and author Mr. Marcus Papadopoulos speaking to us from London.